The prison chapel was quiet, save for the sound of chains dragging across the floor. Amarachi walked barefoot, her pale wrapper brushing the dusty tiles. The noose waited above her, silent, expectant. A priest whispered prayers she no longer believed. A guard wept. The rest only watched. After 3 years of silence, her name still stirred whispers in Lagos. The senator's wife. The killer. The mute. But Amara had not always been quiet. As the sun cracked through the Kirikiri prison windows, Amara's mind drifted, not to Obina's death, not to the trial, but to the day it all began. She had been 17, trembling in the back seat of a Prado Jeep. Fresh out of Yaba Girl's home, she was being rescued by Senator Obina, a family friend. He had said, a guardian. She remembered the way the Ikoyi mansion towered over her like a monument. Obina had smiled, his red cap sitting proud on his head. Welcome home, Amarachi, he said, touching her shoulder too long. That touch had lingered for years. Final words, the warden asked softly. Amara shook her head. The noose slipped over her neck. Tight, coarse. Her heart was still. No fear, no tears. Because deep inside, the truth was louder than ever. And Lagos was about to hear it. At first, the Ikoyi mansion felt like a palace. Chandeliers gleamed. Marble floors echoed her shy footsteps, and the staff called her small madam. But Amara quickly learned that every gift came with a condition. Obina bought her a phone, then checked her messages daily. He paid for her private tutors, but locked her in during lessons. Her dresses were long, her conversations brief. By the time she turned 21, the house had become a curated prison. On her birthday, he gifted her a gold necklace and asked her to marry him. It's the only way I can truly protect you, he said, his voice rich like melted velvet. Amara hesitated, but gratitude clashed with loneliness. The man who raised her was also the only family she had. So she nodded, slowly, silently. The wedding was private, elite, televised for Lagos society. She wore ivory lace. Obina wore agbada with lion embroidery. She smiled for the cameras, a perfect bride carved from silence. That night, she stood by the bedroom window, watching the city lights flicker like secrets. Behind her, Obina poured champagne. You're mine now, Amara, he whispered. And that's when the door to the outside world began to shut completely. Her name was removed from her former school files. Her calls were blocked. Her bank account closed. When she asked questions, his voice changed. Gentle became sharp. Loving became law. She still spoke then, but less each week, until, eventually, silence became easier than being unheard. Years passed. Inside the mansion, time fell frozen. Soft rugs underfoot, jazz music humming through speakers, and Amara gliding like a ghost between walls that no longer echoed her voice. Obina controlled everything. Her clothes, her meals, her sleep, even her body, which he treated like an extension of his empire. When he smiled in public, it was polished and proud, but at home, his tone was cold. You think too much, Amarachi, he would say. You belong to me. That's all. Once, she had asked to visit the grave of her parents. He looked at her and said simply, They are dead. Let them rest. That night, he locked her in the room for 2 days. The help stopped looking her in the eye after that. Amara stopped asking. She kept a journal, only a few pages, hidden inside an old Bible. In it, she wrote prayers without names, pain without dates. It was the only place she dared to speak, until the day she saw the file. She wasn't looking for it. She had dropped a serving tray in Obina's study and bent to pick it up. The drawer had slid open. Inside, stamped with red ink, were documents from a private security firm. The target, Aichikwa Nenadike, deceased. Her parents. The date matched the fire. The one that made her an orphan. The killer wasn't the accident they told her about. It was a contract, and Obina had signed it. She stood still, paper trembling in her hand. Her entire life, a lie built on ashes. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just folded the document and placed it back carefully. Then she walked out of the study. She never opened her journal again. From the moment she returned the file to Obina's drawer, Amara became someone else. Not louder, not bolder, just still, Her silence took on shape, like armor. She cooked his meals, folded his egg batters, smiled when needed. But inside, her spirit split. Half of her remained obedient. The other half watched, waited, burned. Obinna noticed. "You're quieter these days," he said one night over agusi soup. "I like it." She nodded, spooned her food, and imagined slipping the file under a journalist's door. But she did nothing. She couldn't. There was no proof anymore. No one who would believe her word over a senator's legacy, especially when the media called her the luckiest orphan in Lagos. She began to notice more. Whispers between Emeka and Obinna, unmarked envelopes, sudden meetings behind locked doors. Obinna was planning something, a senatorial re-election campaign, maybe something darker. His greed wasn't slowing. It was sharpening. Then came the gala. He brought her along, dressed her in blood-red lace and diamonds. Cameras flashed. Senator and wife looking radiant. The headlines read. But backstage, he squeezed her wrist until it bruised. "Fix your face. You're mine, not a statue." She stared past him, thinking of her mother's laughter, her father's voice, the fire, the silence. That night, he slept soundly. She didn't. By morning, Obinna was dead. A sharp blow to the head. No weapon found. Only Amara in the room, standing still in her wrapper, blood on her sleeve, face unreadable. The staff screamed. The police came. She said nothing. Not a word as they handcuffed her. Not a word as they read her rights. Only her eyes spoke, and no one knew how to listen. The news broke before the blood dried. Breaking, Senator Obinna is found dead in his Ikoyi mansion. Lagos lit up with gossip and conspiracy. But inside the police van, Amara sat barefoot, her wrapper streaked with blood, wrists cuffed, face blank. "Say something, madam," one officer urged as the van bumped down the road. Even God spoke on the seventh day. She turned her head and looked out the barred window. At the station, the interrogations began. They showed her photos of the scene. The blood-slicked marble, the broken glass, his twisted neck. They yelled, coaxed, threatened. Still, nothing. "She's mad," one detective scoffed. "Or guilty. Or both." The public loved the drama. "Silent killer or abused wife" trended online. Pundits filled airwaves with their theories. Women's groups protested. Men's forums defended Obinna's legacy. But Amara refused to speak. Even Barrister Yetunde Afolabi, her young state-appointed lawyer, was frustrated. "You have a chance to save yourself," she pleaded during a visit to Kirikiri prison. "Give me something, anything." Amara stared at the peeling wall, hands folded in her lap. Her scarf was now plain, her eyes tired. Yetunde pushed a photo across the table. "This is the evidence they are using. Blood on your wrapper. Your fingerprints on the bed frame. No signs of forced entry." No reaction. Behind her silence was more than guilt. It was grief, rage, fear that speaking would twist the truth into lies. So she chose silence, not as surrender, but as protest, not as weakness, but as power. And as the trial date approached, Lagos prepared for a spectacle. Amara prepared for war, with her mouth closed. The courtroom was packed. Reporters squeezed beside gossip bloggers. Armed officers lined the walls. Senator Obinna's portrait hung near the judge's bench, draped in black velvet. His ghost was everywhere. Amara sat quietly in the dock, clad in a plain blue prison dress. Her hair was tied back, her eyes hollow. Every camera lens was aimed at her, waiting for the sound of her voice. None came. Barrister Yetunde stood beside her, defiant in anchor-trimmed robes. She argued abuse, manipulation, a young wife trapped for years under a powerful man. "She is not a murderer," Yetunde said. "She is a product of silence forced upon her." The prosecution laughed. "If she's not guilty, why doesn't she speak?" The lead prosecutor boomed, pointing. "Even God gave Eve a voice." The crowd murmured. Some nodded. Some frowned. Witnesses were called, maids, drivers, party guests. They told half-truths twisted by fear. Emeka, Obinna's aide, claimed he never saw trouble between them. His face was unreadable. They showed the jury Amara's diary, the few pages left. "I feel like a shadow," My voice echoes but never lands. The words haunted the room. But when it was Amara's turn to speak, she stood and said, "Nothing. Not a word." The judge sighed. "You deny yourself a chance at justice." Yatun's final plea cracked. "Your Honor, sometimes silence is not absence. It is the loudest scream." But in a city ruled by status, screams fall quietly. The gavel struck. Guilty of murder. Sentenced to death by hanging. Gasps filled the air. And still, Amara didn't flinch. She simply sat today, as if she'd known the verdict long before the trial began. The day before her execution, Lagos rained. Thunder rolled over Kirikiri prison like a warning. Amara sat on her cot, watching water streak the barred window. A soggy Bible lay open beside her, unread. A matron brought her jollof rice and a bottle of water. "You want to see a pastor?" she asked. Amara shook her head. Later, Yatun arrived, drenched, heels muddy, makeup faded. "I've filed an appeal. New evidence might." She paused. Amara simply smiled, a sad, knowing curve of the lips. "No." Yatun whispered. "Still nothing." Amara stood and handed her a folded piece of paper. "Read this after," she mouthed. It was the first time anyone had seen her lips move in over a year. That night, Emeka sat alone in a bar on the mainland. He downed a third shot of dry gin, eyes locked on the flat-screen TV. Tomorrow, Amara will be executed. Found guilty of killing her husband, Senator Benaease. Emeka's fingers trembled. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the file he had stolen, the one with Obina's signature authorizing the hit on Amara's parents. He had kept it all these years. For what? Fear, loyalty, survival. Now, guilt. He stared at it, then at the flickering TV, where Amara's prison photo flashed on screen. Gaunt, silent, condemned. His silence had kept her chained. Hers would carry her to the grave. And still, she had never pointed at him, never begged. Just silence, just truth, buried too deep for justice to reach. At sunrise, the prison yard was still. Amara stepped forward barefoot, wrists bound, face calm. The rope hung like a question. The crowd was small, officials, press, a priest, 2 guards. No family, no last-minute pardon. She didn't beg. She looked to the east, where the Lagos sky blushed with early light. Then she nodded, and it was done. The nation stirred. Some cheered, others mourned. But for a few, those who knew the shadows behind the story, the silence rang loud. That evening, a news blog posted an article titled, "Did Lagos Just Hang the Wrong Woman?" Attached was a scanned letter. It was Amara's note to Yatun. "They silenced my mother with fire. They buried my father with lies. They groomed me with guilt. I gave them silence because I knew words would never be enough to make them hear. But if silence is all I have, let it echo." Below it, another file appeared, this time leaked anonymously. Obina's signature. The contract for the deaths of Ikechukwu and Nenadike. Lagos erupted. Protests flared. Hashtags trended. Hashtag silence was truth. Justice for Amara. At Obina's Okoye mansion, windows stayed shut. Chief Nwachukwu declined comment. Emeka vanished. Yatun resigned and started a foundation for wrongfully accused women. And somewhere on the mainland, a young journalist visited the Yaba ruins of Amara's childhood home. He placed a single white hibiscus by the gate. "May your silence never die," he whispered, because in a city that fed on noise, it was the quietest voice that finally shook its soul.